Welcome back to the deep dive. So, today we're tackling a topic that, well, on the surface it might sound a little, I don't know, dry.
A little academic, maybe?
Yeah, academic, like something out of a dusty history book or even worse, a corporate organizational meeting. We're talking about the Christian church.
Right. But if you're expecting a lecture on, say, the Reformation or a breakdown of church governance, you're definitely in the wrong place.
Definitely.
We're going back to the source code, so to speak.
Hmm.
We have a stack of ancient texts here
Yeah.
that describe this global community in ways that are, well, frankly, they're wild.
Wild is the right word because when you actually read these texts, the picture you get isn't of a building or, an institution. It's something organic.
Hmm.
It's alive,
Yeah.
it's a bit messy, and it's very mysterious.
It really is. We're looking at three specific sections of Scripture today.
Yeah.
From Mark chapter 4, we've got two parables spoken by Jesus. The parable of the growing seed and then the parable of the mustard seed. And then, to kind of ground all that, we have a theological declaration from Paul in Ephesians chapter 4, all about unity.
So our mission today is to figure out how these ancient writers saw this whole church thing, starting from basically nothing and growing into a unified body.
Yeah.
And I think the tension we're going to find is between, how much of this is human effort and how much is just mysterious growth that happens on its own.
That is the core tension.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Is it something we build or is it something that grows?
Well, looking at this first source from Mark 4, I'm kind of wondering if I need a green thumb to understand this. Do I need to be a gardener?
It might help,
Yeah.
but I think the point is actually that you don't need to be an expert gardener to get the miracle here. Let's look at that first text, Mark 4, verses 26 to 29.
Okay, let's unpack it.
Yeah.
This is the parable of the growing seed. Jesus says, "This is what the kingdom of God is like." And then he describes a scenario that, honestly, it sounds a little hands-off.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. It says, "A man scatters seed on the ground, night and day. Whether he sleeps or gets up, the seed sprouts and grows."
And here's the kicker. Though he does not know how.
Right. So looking at this guy, this farmer, is he lazy? Because he scatters the seed and then just goes about his life. He's sleeping, he's getting up.
Right.
He isn't out there with a microscope or, pulling the seed up every 3 hours to check on it.
No, and that's a brilliant observation. He isn't lazy. He's trusting the nature of the seed itself.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. If you were digging it up every day to help it grow, what would happen?
He'd kill it.
He'd kill it.
Hey.
Exactly. The text is emphasizing the limit of human agency here. The farmer does his part. He scatters the seed, but then he has to yield to a process he doesn't control
Okay.
and explicitly doesn't even understand.
He does not know how. That's pretty humbling.
It is. And then we get to what I think is maybe the most critical phrase in this entire passage. Verse 28. All by itself, the soil produces grain.
All by itself.
Yeah. In the Greek, that phrase is automato. It's where we get our word automatic.
Oh, wow.
The earth acts automatically. The power of life is in the seed and the soil, not in the farmer's anxiety or his micromanagement.
So if we apply this to the concept of the church, which is what this deep dive is about, that suggests that the growth of this community isn't dependent on having the perfect strategy or the flashiest marketing plan. It just happens.
Precisely. It happens all by itself.
Yeah.
And notice the progression it describes. It's not instant. It says first the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head.
It's sequential. It's a process.
It's developmental. You can't have the full kernel before you have the stalk. And so often when we look at growth, whether it's our own spiritual growth or the growth of a movement, we get frustrated because we want the full kernel immediately.
We want to skip the stalk phase.
We want to skip the stalk. But this text describes a kind of biological necessity. It takes time, it's gradual.
And it's often invisible, right? Like when it's just a seed under the dirt or even just a tiny green shoot, it doesn't look like much.
Exactly. But just because you can't see the kernel yet doesn't mean the growth isn't happening. The mystery is that life is at work, even when the farmer is asleep.
That is a relief, honestly. But the text doesn't just leave us in that passive state forever. Verse 29 takes a sharp turn.
It does.
It says, "As soon as the grain is ripe, he puts the sickle to it because the harvest has come."
Right. The sleeping is over. All that growth had a purpose. It wasn't just growing to be a pretty plant in a field. It was growing to be harvested. There's an end goal.
So there's a time for the farmer to be active.
Yes, at the planting and at the harvest. But in that long stretch in the middle, that's the time for trust.
It seems like the source text is really trying to relieve the pressure of that middle period.
Absolutely. It removes the burden of making it happen from the human side of the equation.
Okay, so that's the how of the growth. It's automatic, mysterious, slow. Now let's look at the what. What is this thing actually becoming? Because the next text in our stack, Mark 4, verse 30, it shifts the metaphor just a little bit.
Yes, this is the famous parable of the mustard seed. Jesus asks, "What shall we say the kingdom of God is like? Or what parable shall we use to describe it?"
And he answers with something that feels like a total paradox. He says it's like a mustard seed, which he calls the smallest of all seeds on earth.
Now, botanically speaking, we know there are microscopic seeds like orchids that are smaller.
Sure.
But in the context of a first-century Palestinian farmer, the mustard seed was the colloquial standard for tiny. It was the smallest thing you'd really deal with in your garden.
So we start with the insignificant, the barely visible.
But look at the contrast in verse 32. Yet when planted, it grows and becomes the largest of all garden plants.
From the smallest to the largest, that's a huge inversion of status.
It is. It's saying that you cannot judge the potential of the kingdom of the church by how it looks at the start. What begins as something easy to lose, a speck of dust essentially, has a kind of genetic destiny to dominate the entire garden.
I love the visual description here, too. It doesn't just say it gets big.
Yeah.
It says, with such big branches that the birds can perch in its shade.
And that imagery is so vital. Why does it matter that birds can perch in it?
Well, ecologically, it means it's useful, right? It's not just taking up space. It's providing a habitat, a home.
Exactly. It provides shelter. It provides shade. The growth isn't just for the sake of size. It's for the sake of hospitality. A mustard plant that grows massive but offers no shade has, in a way, failed its design.
So the implication for the church here is that its expansion is meant to be a refuge for others.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So if we combine these two images from Mark, what we have is a community that grows through this mysterious internal power that we can't really engineer.
Right.
And it grows from total insignificance into a massive shelter for others.
That's a beautiful summary. It moves from micro to macro and from being hidden to being helpful.
But here's where I want to pivot, because growth is great, but cancer grows too, right? Unchecked growth can be chaotic. How does this thing stay together? How is it not just a wild, overgrown jungle?
That is the perfect setup for our third source. We're jumping from the Gospels over to the epistles, specifically Ephesians 4, verses 4 to 6. And this is where we move from the biology of the kingdom to its, let's call it the identity or the architecture.
Okay, so the plant has grown. Now what is it?
Paul, the writer here, he gives us what I like to call the list of ones. It's this rhythmic, repetitive manifesto of unity.
Yeah, I'm looking at the text here, and the word one is it's hammering away. One body and one spirit, one hope, one Lord, one faith, one baptism.
Let's break those down because I think the order really matters. He starts with one body and one spirit.
One body. That connects right back to the organic metaphor we were just talking about, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. A body is an organism. It has different parts, hands, feet, eyes, but it's a singular entity. You don't see a pile of limbs walking down the street. You see a body.
Right.
So Paul is saying the church isn't a loose collection of individuals or some club you join. It is a singular organic unit.
And one spirit seems to be the animating force, a bit like the life inside the seed we talked about earlier.
Exactly. The body is the vehicle. The spirit is the breath, the life. Without the spirit, the body is just a corpse.
Then he moves to, just as you were called to one hope when you were called.
One hope. This is all about orientation. It's about the future. What binds this community together isn't just where they came from, but where they are all going together. They share a destiny.
And then we get to the theological core, the foundation. One Lord, one faith, one baptism.
This is the bedrock. One Lord implies a singular allegiance. And you have to remember, in the Roman world where Caesar is Lord was the political slogan, saying one Lord, and meaning Jesus was a radical, even dangerous political statement of unity.
And one faith.
That means the content of what they believe, they aren't just making up as they go along. There's a shared trust, a shared story at the center of it all.
And then one baptism. I noticed in our source text, it actually cuts off at BAP, but contextually, we know it's baptism.
Right. It's the shared rite of initiation is the entry point. It didn't matter if you were a Jew, a Gentile, a slave, or free. You went through the same water. It completely leveled the playing field.
So what strikes me here is the the certainty of this list. In Mark, with the seed, there was all this mystery. He does not know how. But here in Ephesians, there is no mystery. It is very definitive. There is one body, not, hey, let's hope there will be one body someday.
That's a profound distinction. Mark highlights the process, which is mysterious and slow. Ephesians highlights the status, which is established and factual. Paul isn't telling them, try really hard to become one body. He's telling them, you are one body, so act like it.
That completely flips the script on how we usually think about unity, doesn't it? We normally think unity is something we have to manufacture through compromise or negotiation.
Right.
We think if we just hold enough meetings, we can build unity. Paul says, no, the unity is a theological fact created by God. Your job is to maintain it, not to manufacture it.
It's like the difference between gluing two sticks together versus two branches growing out of the same trunk.
Yes, that's a perfect analogy. Gluing sticks together is organization. Branches sharing a trunk is organic unity. That's the one body.
So let's try to synthesize this. We have these two very different kinds of texts. On one hand, you have the farmer who sleeps while the earth produces grain all by itself. On the other, this strict rhythmic declaration of one Lord, one faith. How do these fit together for someone listening?
I think they provide a complete picture of the church's nature. The Mark texts tell us that the energy for the church is divine and unstoppable. It starts small, it looks insignificant, but it has the DNA of a giant sheltering tree. We don't have to stress about making it grow. We have to trust the seed.
You have to trust the seed. And the Ephesians text, it tells us that the structure of the church is already a given. We don't have to invent a new identity. We don't have to create unity from scratch. We are already wired together by one Spirit, one hope, one Lord.
So in a way, both texts are actually about relieving human anxiety.
Exactly.
Mark says, stop worrying about the growth. The soil handles that. And Ephesians says, stop worrying about creating unity. The Spirit has already handled that.
You've absolutely nailed it. It's a call to participate in something that is already alive and already whole, rather than trying to, build some Tower of Babel with our own hands.
It's interesting to think about that ecological function again, the birds perching in the shade. If the church is this one body that grows all by itself, then its ultimate success is measured by who it shelters.
Yes. The unity in Ephesians isn't just for the sake of the insiders feeling good about being together. It's so that the body is healthy enough to grow those branches Mark talks about. A fractured body can't grow a sheltering tree. A disunified community can't offer shade to the birds. The unity enables the function.
That connects the one body right back to the largest of all garden plants. They're two sides of the same coin.
Precisely.
This has been a fascinating look at just a few short verses. We've gone from a seed growing while a farmer catches some Z's, to a giant bush hosting a flock of birds, to a unified body bound by a single spirit and hope.
It really challenges the modern mindset. We're so used to hustle culture, even in our spiritual communities. We think if we aren't grinding, nothing is happening.
Right.
These texts invite us to a different rhythm, a rhythm of scattering, sleeping, trusting, and then eventually harvesting.
And recognizing that we are already one.
Right. We aren't strangers trying to get along. We are limbs of the same body.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you really want the listener to walk away with?
I think it's that concept of a self-sustaining reality. The text says all by itself. If you are feeling burnt out, or if you feel like the world is chaotic and the church is irrelevant or dying, remember the mustard seed. Remember the sleeping farmer. The life is in the seed, not in the farmer's anxiety.
That is a comforting thought. But before we go, we always like to leave our listeners with something to chew on, a provocative thought to take into their week.
Here's what's on my mind after reading all this. We live in a world that is obsessed with building brands, building platforms, building networks. But these texts talk about growing. So here's a question.
Okay.
If the growth happens all by itself while we sleep, and the unity is already established as one body, how much of our modern anxiety, and maybe even our modern conflict, comes from trying to build what is actually meant to be grown?
Trying to build what is meant to be grown. That is a huge distinction.
It changes everything about how you approach your community in your own life.
Wow. All right, listeners, let that seed germinate for a while. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the organic, mysterious, and unified